Beautiful.
Thanks for the food. And we kind of, I know, this is just, what we're going to do. We're going to bow to the earth. We're gonna pray with thanks to the Spirit that gives to us all this food. We're gonna thank the makers, who we don't know who they all are, so just bow to everybody. And then we sing a song many people know, which is the Johnny Appleseed song. Can somebody who has an opening note? How about you, Ron?
I'm done.
Oh, the Lord is good to me. And so thank the Lord for giving me the things I need. The song of the rain and the apple seed. The Lord is good to me. Amen. So find your way here as you wish. You know, kind of happy chaos.
Oh, you know that plant where the orchid was and the other plant?
Happy chaos. It's beautiful. I heard you outline this.
I didn't see that most of my pots out of the courtyard were up with this. So last night I checked your water, and that little everybody really working hard.
Boys off too. We're gonna start going up. Got the dogs. Where's all the dogs?
Oh yeah, sorry. But you're Barbara, I can see that. Okay. Hi, Bob. And then when we
Take a video.
Actually, Devon seems to be doing really well. She's so it's very hard.
I said 40, 30.
Good, how are you doing?
Just right. The last minute was when I had so much running around on big. Can't go wrong.
I think the fact of the wonderful comment made by his Jewish visitors. 4, 2, 3. Great is thy faithfulness. You know this one, Daniel?
I think so.
Sounds like you know it.
Play it like you mean it.
Uh-oh. Gotta make sure we're all on the same page, though.
We're gonna need the worship.
Volume out of this.
It's plenty.
Really?
You share any memories from as far back as you can dredge up about this church? What things were happening? Give us some years.
Okay, we came in 1946, but we didn't go to church until well, I don't know when we started going to church, but we joined the church in 1950 when Paul and Mary Margaret were here. I don't know if Mary Margaret was here, I think it was just Paul, because he came out fresh from the seminar, and Mary Margaret was still in nursing school back in Pennsylvania.
Came 1 year later.
So she came the next year. Paul went back and married her, and they came back. And we had Sunday school at 2:30 on Sunday afternoon, and church at 3:30, because Paul served 3 churches at that time, Summit Park, as well as the church in town, and here. So we got last choice. Anyway, we did have Sunday school here.
And he did it all on horseback, right? No days. No, I'm kidding.
Anyway, Mary Margaret and I have been having a lot of fun reminiscing and catching up on our kids and what became of them and so forth.
Anything you want to ask about with the James? You want to probe Jane's memory a little bit on anything that you remember from the island? Or do you want her to remember? Tell the electricity story. I mean, we've heard it 1,000 times, but we've got to hear it again. It's our favorite story. Well, when electricity came to the island, what you do with the irons?
Well, when we came, there was no electricity, and it was pretty rough living because I had 3 little kids. And somebody brought me an old washing machine that you went like this and it agitated a little. And we bought the place knowing that there was a well, but we didn't know wells went dry. And we hadn't been here very long till the well went dry. And we had to drill a well. And that's when I first met Murray. He came here at the same time, and he didn't have a well. I mean, he just bought some property and wanted to drill a well, so we drilled our wells at the same time. And of course, we all had little places to pump our water up into a tank with a gasoline engine because we didn't have electricity. And we pumped them up into these tanks. Murray never could get his gasoline engine to go. So somebody told him that Bill was pretty good with fixing the little machines like that. So he came over and helped him, and every time Murray needed to pump water, Bill went over and helped him get his gasoline pump started. That's when we first met Murray and Millie.
Okay. And when electricity came to the island, what did you do?
Well, Bill and then Colonel Vonnegut came. They came shortly after we did. And Bill and Colonel decided that we should have electricity on the island. So they went over to Puget Power and asked them if they would build a line over here to us. And they were not interested, period. So Doc Finley lived on the island. He was living at Bubble's house at the time, Bubble's house. Anyway, he wanted to build a line, but he didn't have any money. So how do we get enough money to build this line? And he kind of estimated what it would cost. So we formed a co-op and each paid $250 to get electricity. And if they didn't have $250, you could pay $10 a month. So that's how we got electricity. Then when we got it built, Puget Power did buy it for $25,000. So that's how we got electricity.
And then you did what with your irons?
Oh, well, I had a party at my house. I took all my old lamps and all my old sad irons and dumped them in the well.
And now you know how much those antiques are worth at the bottom of the well.
If anyone wants
If
to
you've
go
been in any
digging
antique store,
there
really.
behind who lives there now? We lived in that little house where
Gloss.
Mike and
Yeah, gloss.
the Guas live.
Okay.
So if you want to go digging, well, you get the permission from the Guas.
Okay, let's have one more song before we go on. It was a gift to you when you left the church? Okay. You want to go up and say a few words about it, and then maybe let Paul talk a bit about some memories from your time here, from 48 to 52, wasn't it?
That's correct.
48 to 52.
Yeah, okay. So, if anyone wants to gather with her up there and look at some of these names, you may have had a chance to see them out there when it was hanging. But I recognize even a few names from being in the Historical Society, but
Yeah, well, just reading the names will bring back memories. I'm sure there's so many. Dot and Laggy, Wernstead, Donnie, Dorothy, Dick, Faulkner, Bill and Millie Kelly, can't read under that, Jane and Bill Veal with Glenn, Arnie, and Gary, Nashams, Mr. and Mrs. Nasham, Lester and Rose Albertson, Marge and Bill Fast with Karen, Barbara, and Billy. And question mark, did they have a baby? And the Kingstons and the Clippingers and Fred and Jenny Pinio and Lulie Blackington, Lenore McGill, Dorothy Schiller, George and Dinah Humble and their son Clive, and Ali Levesque, Dwayne and Cliff Weigel, Rose and St. Andre, Rose and Ralph, is that right? Rose and Ralph? Or was Ralph a child? Anyway, the St.
there's a
Andrews.
Weigel window here. Which one is the Weigel window? I can't,
Oh, St. Andrew.
anyone remember which is the, memory?
The lighthouse.
Weigel family?
The lighthouse.
The lighthouse, yeah.
Yeah, you all know Kit Weigel.
Huh?
If you called him Kit, you'd know who you meant. Clifford, nobody knows. Kit.
But he must have had a dad thing.
This was
Is
the
that right?
parents.
Yes.
Oh, I'm a generation
You
out.
are generation parents.
They say it.
And the Benches and Harveys and Elaine and John Zahner and, oh my goodness, this all bring back so many memories. And Mrs. Reed, I don't see one from her, but anyway, Guemes was a place for us of health and hope and comfort, because we were not only here right after our wedding. I still remember, I'd never been west of Chicago, and I thought last night as we were driving here, there was a magnificent sunset coming from the west as we drove over the Swinomish Slough. I'm sorry they call it a channel now. It's so much nicer, Swinomish Slough. And there was this golden future. it just seems so symbolic and wonderful to us newlyweds. And Paul carried me over the threshold of 3217
My
R.
back hasn't been the same.
3217 R Avenue, if I remember it. If you happen to drive by now, there's no plaque or, it's all boats and industrial area, but it was housing then. And so the Guemes Church was just a wonderful fellowship, and of course I fell in love with Jane Beale and Helen Vonnegut, who were age mates for me, and loved all the seniors who every Sunday, I bet there were a few Sundays that we didn't sing I Need Thee Every Hour and Sweet Hour of Prayer. Those were favorites that we sang. Then after 4 years, we left to go to the Philippines, and in 1956, about 4 years later, we came back, and at that time, Paul was in very poor health, and I was pregnant with our third child, and we didn't have a job, either of us, and we needed a place for rest and restoration, and that's when Guemes embraced us. And it has meant so much all these years to know this was the place where we began to get back energy and health. So we have great, thankful memories of this church and this community, and many, many thanks.
And Paul, before you get up, I'm going to ask for a few headlines.
48, 40s, well, let's see.
Stand up so we can hear you.
World War II was ending up. And let's see, Anne Frank went into hiding. Dewey defeats Truman. A famous Russian was assassinated in Mexico. Leon Trotsky. And of course, December 1941 is when what happened? And that's a few facts from the 1940s.
Okay, I'm going to ask Paul to come up and share something.
That I recognize we knew many of these people very well, could call friends, but many of them signified, as they've signed on this, that the church, they had some connection with the church, but they were not intimately in the church. And I think that that's saying what the best churches are. We would like everyone to be members of our church. That doesn't happen, and maybe it's just as well it doesn't. But it reminds me that even then, that we had, there are quite a few names here that I have, that they were not closely connected, but that the church had as much influence as it did, that they could put this on a farewell to a church minister and wife, and shows even now, and I think there's no change there, except there are more of you in the church that have the influence in the community, and more of them are on here would recognize that the church does have a part in the community, even beyond what being membership in the church is. In the church itself, which is important, I have listed up, and this is an audience participation time, because I'm 92 and my memory is not as good now as it was in the 40s. Maybe that's happened to one or two of you too. And so please do not hesitate to say, oh, but there was this person. You are not listening that should be remembered, and it's probably on there, whether they're on there or not. But feel free in audience participation to either correct me or add on someone that I have missed that I want to, especially let's recognize again the church with names on here did have an influence in the community, and the only difference there would be that there are more than are listed here at that time, and not being recognized named right now than they are now. And that's part of a healthy church, a church that is so insulated that it's just spending time on itself and its own concerns, and they're not reaching out, is not what I understand. I don't think what you understand is the real church, not the Church of Jesus Christ. Church of Jesus Christ is outgoing, cares for people, and its activities are in those things, and its resources are spent for the outreach, a lot of their resources, while taking good care of itself. That's important too. In the church work listed in the church, and here's where I'm likely to be missing some. Lenore McGill was very active, and I believe Lenore was treasurer. You think that's true, right? Yeah. Mrs. Reed, Louise Pinio is our pianist. I don't know where Louise now is. Is she still alive?
Oh,
No, it's been quiet. She was our pianist.
She was our organist. We think we had a piano.
We had an organist, yeah. Louise Pinio was the pianist then. Yeah. Pardon?
I mean, it was one of those old pump organs.
We did not have piano. We had organ, a little piano. Organ. Yeah. Faith Johnson Zinner was active in the church. Rose St. Andre, Jane Veal and Bill Reed, the children Glenn, Arnie, and Gary were part of it. Kerner and Helen Vonnegut, and children Kit and Ken, and Kit and Ken. See, he is not living now. Or is it?
No, he just died last year.
He just died last year, Helen, yeah. Bill and Colonel. And then we were acquainted with Ruth Crook many years, including years of Guemes. Ruth Crook and Guy, and were active in this church, at least attending this church those years that we were here. Bill and Marge Fast and children. Do any of you acquainted with the Fasts? You were, yeah.
Okay, first off, it was the end of his ministry. All my life, I lived in a parsonage between Maine and North Dakota and New Hampshire and Washington and Guemes. This was their favorite. I'm sorry if any of you are from Anacortes, but this was their favorite. They both came from farm background. My father came from a very poor family, and my grandfather was a chicken farmer and traveled 15 miles to take eggs into town to sell for 15 cents a dozen, and he put 3 of the 4 kids through college on that kind of income. And my father met my mother in Boston at Gordon Seminary, and they had their first parish as a Baptist church in New Hampshire. During the war, they were in Maine, where he had 6 Point church. And it was spread over what must be, about 55 miles or so. And he would do 3 on one Sunday and 3 on the other Sunday. So, and he did youth group in all of those churches every week. And my father, but that's not how his ministry went. The church and what happened on Sunday was part of it. But the biggest part of his ministry was calling, was dealing with people. So when we came to, when he went to Forks, was when he came to the West Coast, he went to Forks. At some point, he changed to, I think it's when I was a kid, he changed from Baptist to UCC. Congregational. Most of the churches in the New England states were congregational in background. And at some point he said, he was very pointed, you do not stay in a church a long time. 5 to 7 years max, no more than that. That's when a minister leaves. And fresh blood goes into the next congregation. So we moved a lot. And he got to the point of being very involved with the UCC church. And when we were in Forks, Washington, he became very involved in the Hungarian Revolution and all that was going on nationally. And if Forks can become a sanctuary church, by God, there's any church in this country. But they became a sanctuary church for a Hungarian family that was brought in here from Hungary. So, Guatemala and all those countries, we should be coming to the forefront. He was very active politically, but under some of his greatest friends, he didn't agree with at all. And they had great debates about all kinds of subjects. And our youth group, it is amazing to me the discussions that are going on between church groups now about how we feel about gay and lesbians, how we feel about abortion, how we feel about peace, how we feel about anyway, bunches of things. Those became the topics of our discussion in youth group. And we had a lot of fun too. We went and played, and he could ice skate and do all that stuff with the best of them. But we tangled with those topics. We dealt with them, and he never gave an answer. He just asked all kinds of questions, and you better jolly well figure out how you're going to feel about this. He expected you to come through with those. So we ended up, after I was gone and married, and by the way, he identified with Darrell Berg a lot because Ruth and Darrell were very much like Norman and Marion. They shared ministry, and Ruth was very active in music. My mother was one of the first women to graduate out of Gordon University College, and she was very active in music. I hate to say this, but Sweet Hour of Prayer was not their famous. And Onward Christian Soldiers, my dad would not allow to be sung. Their one great pleasure was classical music, and when they were here, they had tickets and went into Seattle to concerts all the time. And I don't know, this guy had something going with the churches, because the bottom line when he went to a church was, I'm going to have 1 month of vacation every summer, 4 Sundays. Dad stretched that, and the Sunday before, at 1 p.m., we were out the door, and we got back Saturday before the next service was due. So we basically were gone 6 weeks every summer. And they would go, and off year, we would go back east, which is where all of our families were. And we went the route of seeing Grandma this and Auntie so-and-so. And the other year, we went on some venture. They traveled over 5,000 miles in a canoe. They did the Yukon, they did the Churchill, they did all kinds of places. They drove all kinds of places. And every other year, that's what they did for 6 weeks, in spite of the fact that he was supposed to be gone 4. The people that he knew, the only way I remembered this church was through the people. They talked about Jane, which was Veal then. They married you and Murray, didn't they?
He married Bill, married Mia Murray,
And
married
Murray, yeah, that's right. Mary Stapp, one of the names that we would hear frequently. He married Sue, and he married you, didn't he? Wasn't my dad involved? Yep. Kik Weigel, he played cribbage with Kik a lot, and they had great contests. He had great contests with a lot of people in this community, and who could have peas first out of the garden every spring. And he was bound and determined he would have peas before the 4th of July. Madge Welch was another person he was deeply involved with, and I remember. The Knoxons were very close with him. He married their daughter, too.
Which one?
Osborne's, Leo, Gary Davis, somehow they knew. Jeff Gent, he brought up and discussed with us frequently. And Lowell and Shirley Knudsen. He adored you. He greatly honored you. And he reached across, as I say, the church was more, in fact, once he bought some property here on Guemes, on the corner of it was between South and West Shore, right on the corner there. There was someone that owned land there, Anna, somebody, and she couldn't pay the taxes. So Dad bought a tiny little square of that had an old shack on it that he was determined where they were going to stay there sometimes in this shack. And the only reason he bought it was to help out Anna so that she could pay her taxes. And he sold it later. He, by the way, played the stock market on the side. So he, I don't know, if it had been a different age, he may well have been a stockbroker, who knows. He joined Madge Welch in New Zealand. They went and visited Madge's family in there and spent time. Another thing that he did that I'm sure was not part, in fact I know was not part of church policy, is to go back to former churches. Every year when they went back east, he went to every single church they'd ever been to and visited with friends. They were his friends, and they were his lifelong friends. And so we have continued that tradition. So when we went to Maine last year, we looked in and saw the daughter of one of their best friends. And we have kept those connections going in North Dakota. We've kept those connections in, well, there was this 95-year-old lady in the back hills of New Hampshire that we stopped to see every time back there and visit with her, who still works over a cook stove that is wood burning and still makes her own maple syrup and all that kind of stuff. And so they've kept those friends, and it was the people and that were the big thing. And this was one of his favorites.
Well, I learned a couple of things from you, oh my. I learned one is that the travel gene is in your DNA.
Yeah.
And that discovery of peacemaking is not something we've discovered recently in the church.